Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be doing another questions and answers video. Last time we did it for 10,000 subscribers. This time we're doing it for 25,000.
25K.
First off, I want to say a big thank you to all you guys for watching these videos, liking, commenting, and subscribing. We look at a lot of the comments and see your guys' feedback, which is always really good. So thank you for just being a part of the channel. This video is going to be a little bit different than the last one we did. We've gone through and looked at these questions already, so we're a little bit better prepared. And we're also going to try and keep this video a little bit shorter. I know the last one was around 45 minutes. So if we could cut this one between 20 and 30 or even less, that would be better. One thing I also want to say is that we couldn't go through and answer every single question that you guys have asked us. A lot of that being because we don't have the information to answer every single question. So for instance, people asking what kit they should run on a certain truck. We don't have that truck. We don't know all the kits available for that truck. We don't have all that information because we haven't done it yet. So we're not able to answer that stuff. Those are still valid questions. We're just not able to answer them. So just talk to people on social media or at truck meets, and that's where you'll get that information. So I'll just leave it at that, and we'll start getting into the questions. And I'll start with the first one, and I'll ask you, what does OBS mean? So you guys hear us talking about us like OBS trucks or OBS body style. What does that mean?
OBS is old body style Fords. So, I mean, it's pretty,
so it's
self-explanatory.
It's the 92 to 96 F-150 body styles.
It's anything 96 or older, any of the generations before.
Well, they're like the 87 to 91, like yours is brick nose, which is the diesel.
Old body style, like people still call those old body style.
Okay, so that one's technically brick nose, and then the 80 to 86, I think it is the bold nose, which is like our grandpa has that same truck, so that's that body style. So it's just a name for the generation of the truck.
So the next question we have here is, have you ever rolled a truck?
I have not, and Christian has not, and we hope to never roll a truck.
Yeah, that's obviously not something that I have on my bucket list. I don't ever want to experience that. I know the more you push a vehicle and the more you push your limits, like it's bound to happen at some point, but there's no way I'd ever want that to ever happen, especially in anything that we own. It is not, not ideal.
Yeah, we're fortunate to where we don't drive super hard because we don't have to. We're not racing. So in a play truck, hopefully that's never the case and we never have to deal with that. The next question we got is, I'm 17 and want to start fabricating. Should I spend the money on going to a fabrication school or buy a multimatic welder and learn myself? So first off, I think it's cool that we have someone that's this age that's already trying to get into fabrication. I know when we started this truck, I was 15 and you were 19.
18.
Okay, so I was 14 then. Yeah. So yeah, we were super young, and then now I'm 21, he's 25. So
basically in the same boat. Which I was lucky enough to be able to have this truck to learn everything on. So from my standpoint, just buying the tools and doing it hands-on, just learning on your own is the best way of going about it. If you're trying to do it quickly, going to a school and taking everything that you learn from a school, if you're fortunate enough to be able to pay for something like that, that's also a good way of going about it. But with the internet now and how much information is on the internet just at your disposal for free, that to me it's a no-brainer. But that's just I'm only saying that because that's the way I've gone about it.
Yeah, and I guess it all depends on where you're trying to go with it. If you're just doing it recreationally like we are, you can learn it all online and just go buy a welder. If you're trying to do this for some sort of company and you need to get tested and do all that, that's probably an option. By going to the school, you get tested at the end and certified. So it all depends on where you're trying to go with it. But I know from our experience, just for Christian, this was like his college.
It was my college. This is my college fund. Right
here. So this is his degree. This is how he learned to fabricate. So really you have to look at things financially and just the future with it. Maybe try welding using someone else's welder just to see if you like it, because you don't want to hop into school and spend all that money if you don't necessarily like what you're doing. Yeah. So just always keep that in mind. And then I also put a tag here. So how did you learn to weld, and what welder would you recommend for a beginner, perhaps for this person?
I learned to weld literally just by doing it. We bought, the first welder we had was a flux core welder, which nothing on this truck was done in flux core. That was a little bit before we started building this truck, and that was just literally taking scrap pieces of metal and just welding it together, figuring out settings and all that stuff. And then once we got this truck and started building this truck, we ended up getting a Millermatic 211, I think it was. Yeah. Which was just a sole MIG welder. And then a little bit down the road, we ended up getting a multi-process machine, which is MIG, TIG, and stick. And that right there, for a beginner, if you can afford to do something like that, where it has the MIG and the TIG all in one package, I would definitely recommend going with that, so that way you don't have to buy 2 separate machines. What I got was the Millermatic 215, which I think is a great machine. They now have the 220, which is just another step up that has a little bit more amperage, I believe, to it, and it can do aluminum. So depending on your budget, the 215 or the 220 are both 2 really good options for that. And I know there's other name brands now like Everlast, which I have an Everlast TIG welder. They're definitely starting to come out with more affordable stuff with multi-process machines like that, so that's definitely an option too.
Cool. And then I've kind of kept all these questions kind of in certain topics as we go. So the next one's pretty similar. Why do you MIG more often than you TIG?
Why do you think?
Well, speed is one. If you're doing thicker plate, using TIG, you're gonna have to do multiple passes, whereas MIG, you could get by, probably will get by just doing one pass, and you don't have to wait for it to cool down as much. So overall, it just seems like it's a lot faster process.
Yep.
There is something to be said about the looks of TIG though. I personally think it does look better in most things, but as far as convenience, MIG seems to be the way to go.
Yeah, MIG, like he was saying, it depends on what you're doing. So for me personally, MIG I'll do on anything structural or anything that I want to just get done quickly. TIG is more so for beauty stuff, so like an overlay plate, I will TIG weld, and just kind of things like that. But in my opinion, TIG welding is not as strong as a MIG weld will be. That's just from what I've seen and what I've kind of messed around with. There's definitely going to be people that say that's not true, but I just think as far as off-road goes, if you want something that's not going to crack and not going to have issues down the road, MIG weld it and you will never have an issue as long as you know how to MIG weld.
Yeah, and it's probably easier to learn how to MIG weld compared to TIG welding.
Yeah, so I learned MIG welding first before TIG welding, and everything that you learn as far as the basics with MIG welding goes into TIG welding, but you're just using both your hands at that point. So all the basic information and knowledge that you get from MIG welding, you put towards TIG welding, and it's just a step up, basically. The next question is, would you ever consider building a 4x4 vehicle?
Yeah, so this kind of piggybacks off the other question that someone else asked, which was any plans on a TTB build, which TTB is twin traction beams, which came on Broncos, F-150s, all those sort of vehicles. As far as the 4-wheel drive thing, we have nothing against it. Usually with 2-wheel drive, you do pull a little bit more travel though. And just because something like this, where you're going at high speeds over generally flat stuff, you're not in the mountains crawling, you don't really need that 4-wheel drive.
Nope. So
just going with 2-wheel drive is a simpler setup. We're not against 4-wheel drive. If I ever decide to do anything to the 4Runner, like that'll stay 4-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Just depends on what you're doing with it. I mean, that's it.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it just depends on what you're doing with it.
It's definitely not something that we're against at all, but for right this second, with just going fast through the open desert, like 2-wheel drive for us is the way to go for right now.
So when starting the F-150 build, this truck, was the wheelbase kept factory or was it changed?
It was changed. So the rear was pushed forward roughly 3 or 4 inches, and the front ended up getting pushed forward as well, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. And now with the new front end, it's more than likely going to get pushed forward a little bit from where it was with the last beam kit. But the reason we kind of played with the wheelbase was, for one, I didn't want the rear fenders to have a gap between the cab and the fender. I wanted the fender to overlap the cab so it had one nice seamless look to it. And another reason is there is kind of like an optimal wheelbase for an off-road truck, just to be able to go over whoops at speed and have it still be stable but nimble in corners. And trophy trucks are usually around like 115 to 120 wheelbase, and we're at like 135. So these trucks definitely come a lot longer than what like a traditional trophy truck would be, but we kind of shortened it, not as much as we could. We could definitely go shorter in the rear, bring it closer to the cab, but then you end up with shocks in the cab, and it's just a whole nother, whole nother thing.
Exactly.
The next question is, what should I expect if I decide to build a prerunner?
I think the first thing you got to consider and know is that you're going to have to learn a lot. So you're going to have to be talking to a lot of people that are already in the sport, and you're going to have to be going on forums and reading. Desert Rangers is where we learned a lot about building these trucks, about how to do cage layouts, where to set shock angles, everything like that. So Desert Rangers or Race Desert, I know you go on there quite a bit. Yep. Is it kind of the same thing there?
Yeah, same thing. It's just looking through build threads, seeing what other people are doing, looking at the questions they had while building their trucks, seeing what the answers were to those questions. Also, what helped us a lot with this thing is we do have a build thread on Desert Rangers too. So while we were posting in there, if I got to a point where I didn't know what I needed to do or I had a question on something, I would just post the question in there and then people would go and respond to it. So that's also a good option. And then social media too. Like if you find someone on social media that has a truck that you're trying to build, follow them, look at what they're doing, ask them questions on how they did things. Like social media is huge now, and that wasn't really an option when I first started building this truck. So forums were kind of where I went with that.
You should also expect that you're gonna have to spend a lot of time working on things, not just once you get it built, but also maintaining these things. You don't just finish it and just go rip and not ever worry about it again. Every season, you got to be going through, checking heims, checking bolts. You should really be checking a lot of that stuff before each trip.
Yep. Once the truck's
built, you know all about that, working
it
down south.
Once the truck's built, going and tuning the shocks, because that to me is the most important part of any vehicle, because you could throw as much money as you want at a vehicle and the best parts that you can possibly buy, but if the truck's not set up right, it's going to work like crap.
Yeah, for sure.
So the next question is, how much does a build like the F-150 cost in parts and labor?
So this is a question we get on almost every video, always in the DMs too. People always just want to hear a number. I completely understand where the question's coming from. People want to know how much would I need to put into one of these trucks. What I would recommend to you guys is you're not going to have the same exact truck as we are, so it's not going to cost the same. Figure out exactly what you want to do and just price out all the parts. So go on CarTech, go on Dirt King or Missoula and price out the kits. Go on Down South's website or CarTech, price out shocks. You just think of everything that you're going to need to spend the money on and go just list it down and calculate everything, and you're going to have a pretty close number to what you're going to have to spend. And that's assuming you're building it on your own. If you're getting it done by a shop, obviously there's going to be shop time and labor, which is not going to be cheap.
Depending on where you go and who you're having doing it, for sure.
Yeah, so I would, we did this all ourselves, so we didn't have to really worry about that except for the costs of gas, material, and just the initial costs of welders and things like that. But since you're in your own situation, just try and calculate everything on your own, and that'll give you a good idea of what number that you're gonna need to spend. Why are you running KC lights instead of Baja Designs? So these are two of probably the top light manufacturers. You also have Rigid and some other brands, but these are probably the top two.
Baja Designs are the top two premier lighting companies for sure. The reason we went with KC's on the 92 F1 build is because we wanted to keep the lights somewhat period correct.
Yeah.
So to be 100% honest, if Baja Designs had a pod still, an HID pod to be able to put on the top of this truck, we would have ran BD. But because KC does have their carbon pods and that's what we wanted to run on the top of this truck in a light bar or in a light rack, we ended up going with the KC's. And the light output from these KC pods is insane.
It's really good.
But when you get down to like the light bars, the Baja Designs definitely are the way to go with that. I have all the Baja Design stuff on Pamela, and that truck, the light output just from the XLEDs on the front of that is insane compared to what you would have in the equivalent to like a KC. So would we ever sell our own kits, as in like the beam kit that we're doing right now on the front of the truck? And a kind of similar question that we were getting kind of within that as well was, will you ever build any product parts that are universal in use?
So I won't say flat out no that we'll never sell any kits, but as of right now, we don't have any plans on selling suspension kits. At least for something like the beam kit that we have, we don't ever want to sell anything like that and have the liability, at least if we haven't gone out and proven it and put it through the paces. So as far as that, no, but I know you have some plans that you eventually want to do with some production style universal parts for any sort of vehicle.
I have some stuff coming tooling wise that will be here in the next couple months that is going to allow me to be able to start selling stuff to you guys and just to the public in general that I am really looking forward to. I have some stuff that I want to be selling that you guys can be using. It won't be anything suspension related like we were just talking about, at least as of yet. Just because, especially with this beam kit, that is something that my brother did design and kind of create himself, so I don't want to take that, but it's also part of just knowing if this beam kit will work and just seeing, like literally putting it to the test and just seeing what happens with it. So,
what shock package are you guys putting in the front of the truck? So do you want to kind of go through that? We're not going to spill the beans entirely, but we have some cool stuff we're working on.
We can't talk about necessarily what we are doing, but I know a lot of you do know I did post our old shock package for sale on social media, and that is now gone. I can't tell you exactly what we're doing because we do want to keep that a secret for future videos. but it's definitely going to be a step up from where we were.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it, so stay
Yeah.
tuned. We're going to make a whole video probably on the new shock package for the truck, so that'll be coming out in the future once things arrive.
Yeah.
So what type / size of tube do you recommend for someone starting out and thinking about building a roll cage for the first time? So he's asking about a specific truck, but I think this goes
basically for anything.
Yeah, exactly. And another side question that we got that's similar is the 92 F1 build cage, all 4130. I'll answer that yes. But do you want to talk about what kind of tubing you prefer for a roll cage?
Yeah, so ideally, no matter what the truck is, 2-inch tubing, 2-inch 120 wall tubing as your main tube. So your A pillar, your B pillar, and your C pillar, I would recommend doing in 2-inch. That is only because if you ever decide to race the truck, whether you decide to do it on your own or if you sell the truck to someone else and they want to do it down the road, it will be legal for any race sanction. If you do, basically a good rule of thumb is any full-size truck, you want to have 2-inch 120 wall mains, and any kind of mid-size, so like a Ranger, for example, you would want to do 1 3/4 120 mains at the minimum. 1.5 is just not even existent in a truck, in my opinion. So
as far as for main tubes,
for the main tubing, yeah. If you want to do some bracing or some seat bars or whatever it is, 1 1/4 or 1.5, that's totally fine. But the main tubing for the roll cage, definitely 1 3/4 or 2-inch, ideally in anything. So this one right here is not necessarily for me. This is going to be for you. How did you learn Solidworks?
So initially I got Solidworks through school, just out of general interest. It wasn't anything that I had to get. I actually asked to get it. I initially started building things simple, just things that I wanted to build and that weren't necessarily ever going to get built. And so I started off just making radius arm mounts, simple stuff like that. And then I eventually started learning stuff like weldments and sheet metal. So I started making whole rear cage assemblies, just mocking things up. I actually used some realistic measurements off this truck, but just to learn how to go through the whole process and learn how to do different things on the program. I didn't go through any formal video series or go through any classes at school on how to use the program. It was all about something that I wanted to build, and then I'd go and learn how to do it, which I think is the better route to go because you stay motivated and it keeps your attention learning how to do it. If I was super stuck and didn't know how to do anything, I'd definitely go to YouTube and watch a video that encompassed what I was trying to learn. And then I also had a few resources that I could talk to as well. I know Nick at Dirt King's been a huge help as far as learning CAD. And then Marcel is coming in hand now. He just taught me a bunch of stuff as to how to prep files better to get sent out to laser. So just using resources such as friends or YouTube, that's how I learned how to use the program. Now that you've built your first set of beams, what would you do differently? So there's obviously some things that we already have changed to this beam kit since we got it from laser, and things that we're going to change in the files to ensure they're better in the future. Do you want to talk about some of the things that we've changed?
Yeah, we've definitely added a couple overlays to the beams, and I plan on adding to the radius arms once we have everything kind of set in stone. But we also ended up adding a couple internal ribs that we didn't necessarily have in the CAD file, and that was just because once we had the beams here and we were physically looking at them in person, we noticed there was a couple spots where we needed something that we didn't add before. And then just as far as like the ease of putting things together, like he's definitely going to go in and change a bunch of stuff as well. And the beam end as well. We had a lot of people questioning the beam end, and as soon as we had the beams here physically looking at them, we definitely were kind of questioning the beam end a little bit too. So we're going to be adding a little bit more structure to where the spindle actually mounts to the beam, just so we know we don't have any problems down the road.
Yeah, so as far as like the original form of the beams, would they have been strong enough? Maybe, but could we have built them stronger? Yes. Absolutely. And so we're going through and just making changes as we see fit, and the next beam kits will come out even better. What was your guys' first truck/car build?
So that is this right here. Like that was definitely the first. I would say this technically is the first, but as far as my own personal vehicle, I did have a silver 98 F150 that I bought somewhat finished. And then I did a couple little things too along the way. So that for me personally was the very first thing I ever had. That was a build, so to say. But everything that I've learned as far as fabrication goes or just working on vehicles has came from this truck.
Yeah, so like we were saying before, this was like Christian's college, and that's because it was his first build and he learned how to do everything on this. Like I said before, like I was 14 or 15, so I was still super young. I wasn't getting in there and MIG welding stuff together with him. I was kind of watching and overseeing what he was doing, and I learned a lot just by doing that. As far as my personal vehicle, like the red bug is the first thing that you guys see me do, and that's the first thing that I've really built
Personal
on my
project,
own.
Yeah,
Exactly. And then the yellow bug's another iteration of that. Obviously, we'd like to continue doing more and more builds and learning and progressing.
The next one is, where did you get your welding table from?
So this table is a Certiflat. You see a lot of people using either this brand or other similar tables. These things are super legit just because you're able to ground to them and you don't have to ground to individual parts. And then another thing that I think is super cool about it is the height of them. We're on the taller side. We're 6'2/6'3". So normally on a standard table, we're leaning over and our back's hurting. This is up a little bit higher, and so it's a lot easier to work with things. And I think that's really cool. It's a really nice option to have.
Yeah, and if you guys have watched our videos from the very beginning, you saw us working on this table that's sitting right here, which was just a plastic, like foldable table. And just to be able to work off of that, I just had a piece of square, like rectangular tubing that I'd run across the top of the table to be able to ground to so you could work on things. And that table has so much just weld splatter and holes burned through it just from working on that thing, and it just moving all around, where this thing is nice and sturdy. It's not moving, and it's like, this is obviously a way better option. But
Yeah,
it's all upgrades over time.
Yeah, you can start out with anything. Like You start with what you have and you build it up over time, but this was definitely a good upgrade.
So if you could start another truck, what platform would you go with?
So this one, I know Ryan asked this one.
Ryan Weaver?
Yeah, so definitely, I'm not a huge fan of Chevys personally, just the look of them, and just because everyone builds a Chevy and we like to do things differently. As soon as we see a lot of people doing one thing, we go directly the other way. So
it's kind of happening with these trucks, and I don't want to say it's ruining it for me, but it's definitely like I'm losing my hype on this truck just because there is so many of them.
Yeah, there's a lot more being built now, so it doesn't seem as unique to us, at least. As far as other platforms that we might be interested, I know that doing the generation after this, like your round body style F-150, there seems like there's less of those now than these.
There's definitely a decent amount of crew cab ones, but I want to build, me specifically, I want to build an extra cab version just like my silver 98 was.
Yeah.
And beam it and do a bunch of stuff to it, but
something else that I think would be cool to build as well would be the bullnose style, just because you never see those things. Like, I think the 80 to 86 body styles with that front end are super sick. So
that's kind of why I did the brick nose. Like, that's why I built
just
the
different.
7.3. It's just, you don't see it. Granted, is it the best performing truck out there? Absolutely not. But you do not see them built the way that that truck is built. So to me, that's unique. It's cool. It's just different. So
when is Ryan getting linked? So Ryan Weaver with the Ranger build that you guys saw on this channel, when's that truck getting linked?
He's already stacking parts to be able to do it. But as far as the actual date on when that's going to be happening, I don't know, because his deadline was last summer to be able to start doing it, just to do it over summertime, and that didn't happen. So it should
freaking guy, man.
Yeah, I can't speak for him and tell you when he's actually going to be doing that,
but it's definitely in the works.
It's coming.
Is there anything else on the F-150 you want to change or upgrade besides the front end?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Not everything, probably a lot of things won't get changed, but there's a lot of things we would like to do.
Yep.
I know, like this truck, we still don't consider finished yet. We still need to do tint, obviously. A lot of people comment on the purple tint. And then we don't have a headliner right now. It's just tubes and then like sound deadening above that. So that doesn't look good at all. Get some kind of headliner or do some sort of paneling and get that wrapped. That's definitely on our plate. And then a sound system, we don't have that.
Kind of.
We have two speakers in the front.
We have speakers, but we don't. No, we have all four, don't we?
No, we only have the two. So yeah, we definitely, rear speakers, maybe a sub, that would be cool. Air conditioning, that would be legit to have.
AC is definitely happening at some point because this truck gets
hot toasty
inside when you're moving. It's not an issue because we have the wing windows, so we'll crack those things open and just let the air flow through it. But if you're sitting still, the truck gets so hot inside of there just idling. So it's definitely on the list. I think I definitely at some point want to do something to the rear of the truck as well. Just ditch the frame, go full back half, because when I originally built the rear of this truck, it was basically one of the first things that I did, and I didn't know, just with the knowledge that I had at the time, how to actually get all the back half once you cut the frame off, how to get everything square to the truck and just make sure everything was true and just exactly where it needs to be. Whereas now I can definitely go ahead and do that. As far as interior stuff too, I also want to change the way that the B pillar is laid out, which will be kind of a little bit of a task just to be able to get that going. But
Why is that? Why do you want to change that?
the reason I want to change it is because the tube is so close to your head when you're sitting there, and I want to have the cage kind of kick, the B pillar kind of kick back away towards the C pillar, and just keep it away from your head, because it's just a safety thing. And it's something that when I built the truck, we didn't have the seats in it, and I couldn't really dictate where everything was going to be because I didn't know where everything was going to be at the time. And now that the truck is finished, I can see that now as being somewhat of an issue. So I would like to change that at some point.
All right, guys, that does it for all the questions that we're going to be answering in this video. Hopefully we answered your question or answered some other questions you may have had. And this video wasn't super boring. Hopefully it was pretty entertaining and you actually took something out of it. But with that, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.
Peace.